So Barb Toews is with us. She used to work with us at the Inside Out Center years ago. She's an Inside Out instructor and is now at the University of Washington and has been involved in restorative justice for many years. They will all do their much more detailed introductions. Howard Zehr, who is one of the, I believe, one of the originators of restorative justice, and the two of them together have written the book that they'll be talking about today. And Freddie Knowles, Freddie, can you give us a wave? Freddie, I have not seen you in years. Freddie took my Inside Out class at Graterford, I believe, right? Was it Graterford?
Yeah,
Yeah.
twice.
Okay. So they are our three presenters. Welcome, and Barb or whoever, you can go ahead and begin.
Right. Just share my screen here. Whoops. So yeah, we have a 30-minute presentation planned in which we'll show you some of the portraits and interview excerpts from the book. We also have some audio of people reading some of the interviews from the book, not the people themselves, but some folks who read it for them. And myself, Howard, and Freddie all will do different things during those 30 minutes. And then that should leave us about 30 minutes for discussion and questions and that sort of thing. So we'll start with introductions. And since I'm talking, I'll go first. And then Howard and Freddie, you can jump in. As Lori said, I've been doing restorative justice work in some way, shape, or form for what's now apparently the last 33 years or so. So that's kind of my framework for everything. And when I was still in the Philadelphia area, I taught about 8 Inside Out classes through Haverford College, and then worked on staff for a little while. I think it was mostly around research stuff and some other values oriented kind of things. I can't totally remember. It's like 15 years ago. And then I am currently at the University of Washington Tacoma on the faculty there in the School of Social Work and Criminal Justice, and I'm on the criminal justice side of the house. We don't have an Inside Out program there, but we do have other kinds of things going on for incarcerated folks related to education. So we have the Husky Post-Prison Pathways program that intentionally recruits students out of prisons and provides specialized support for folks when they're at UW Tacoma as systems impacted folks. And we're also looking at the development of an in-prison education program. So I was really honored to be part of the book, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Howard or Freddie?
Howard.
All right, I won't argue. Howard Zehr. I lived in Pennsylvania in the early 90s and got to know a lot of folks there, have a lot of connections there yet. I'm at the Eastern Mennonite University in the Shenandoah Valley. I'm now with the Institute for Restorative Justice, but I taught in the Center for Justice and Peacebuilding, a graduate program, for many years. I retired from teaching in 2013. But I've also been a professional photographer, part-time, much of my work life. And I'm always trying to figure out ways to bring my photography and my justice issues together. And this is one of the projects. I've also done one with victims of severe crime. I've done one with children who have parents in prison. And I did one with people in Virginia who have their pickup trucks, but that's a whole other genre. Anyway, Freddie, go for it.
My name is Freddie Nole. I was I spent about 49 years in prison. I got out in 2019. I participated, as I mentioned earlier, in 2 of Lori's Inside Out programs. I was very active while I was in prison, and have been active since I've been out of prison. I was able to construct and coordinate a nonprofit under Yoke Fellowship Prison Ministries for the last 3 years called Meeting at the Door, where we address the needs of those coming out first day by giving them resources and other material things to help them navigate their emergence from community back into the community. I've worked with Barb and Howard doing two of the matter of fact, doing life and still doing life. Fortunately, I was able to do still doing life 25 years later. I was a contributor while I was out and have participated in the numerous presentations of the book. And the rationale for my participating, which I'm quite sure we'll get into later. I'm very involved in prison reform, restorative justice issues, as well as just social issues on anything that changes the perspective that people have about incarcerated individuals, particularly lifers. Thank you.
Thanks. So why don't we get started? Whoops, I'm always forgetting how to move my slides when there we go. Yeah. So the book is about folks who are incarcerated with life without the possibility of parole in Pennsylvania. It features portraits and interviews with 22 lifers. Some of you who are in Pennsylvania, even some of those of you who are not, may know some of the folks in the book because of your involvement with Inside Out and other endeavors you might have inside Pennsylvania prisons. And it's set up so that we have portraits and interviews from Howard's earlier book, Doing Life, which was published in the mid-90s. We have those portraits and interviews side by side with portraits and interviews from 2017. So the middle section of the book then is this back and forth with someone from the earlier time, 25 years earlier, and then kind of who they are and what they're thinking about 25 years later. And Howard can talk a little bit later about how the questions were different across those two times. And so the book is rich with photography. It very much feels like a coffee table book, something that you would have out there for lots of people to see when they come over to your house. And our goal with the book wasn't to tell people what to think about life without the possibility of parole, but really to use the experiences and narratives of the folks who are incarcerated to speak for themselves and to engage people in dialogue. And we're clear about that in the introduction to the book, that we aren't asking people to take a rigid position. And we're clear that that Howard and I have a particular opinion. We don't state it in the book, but you certainly can guess what our opinion is by reading the book. But ultimately, we want people to be thinking and engaging in dialogue about the topic. So we have the basic introduction to the book in the beginning, and then to kind of have a kind of tying up kind of what is a big picture of what we've heard from the folks in the book. There is a closing essay, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, what that essay focuses on later on. Here you can see we have Kimberly and Bruce. Bruce is in Graterford. Some of you may know him from your work there. We're going to then move on and oh, before I do that, I wanted to remind you, the book has also been turned into a traveling exhibit, which is available just for the cost of shipping to communities. And if someone could make a note to remind me about that later, I can tell you more about how to go about getting the exhibit. Seriously, it's free except for the cost of shipping. Okay, what we're going to do next is hear from Betty Huron. We had someone read her interview. So this is not Betty talking, but it gives you an introduction to what you might read in the book and also to Betty's perspectives. And I can't, there we go.
I remember saying years ago, I've watched my children grow up in photos and my grandchildren grow up in photos. Now it's my great-grandchildren growing up in photos. Family is the anchor of my life. I'm still fortunate enough to have them supporting me and loving me and seeing me when they can, though it isn't as often as we would like. The kiosk, email, and tablet have really helped me stay in touch with them. Their love strengthens me. In the last 25 years, I've grown a lot mentally and emotionally, though less so physically. I've had a hip replacement and now a pacemaker. I'm blessed to still be able to function physically and mentally. For about 2 years, I was in a wheelchair, and I thought, I can't do this. You don't have a lot of independence here, so I fought against being dependent even more. It took a long time, but they finally scheduled the surgery. I've learned to live in the moment, to not look so far ahead or behind me at something I cannot change. Living in the moment is also preparing me for the future. I've always felt like a tightrope walker, because if you lean too far to the right with hope, you're going to be disappointed. And if you lean to the left with despair, you're even worse. I'm not balanced every day, but most days I'm pretty balanced. And if the time comes to put in my application for communication, I'd be right there ready. But if not, I'll make the most of what I have. In 2002, we got our first service dogs to train. For the next 10 years, I raised about 12 dogs until I got my hip replacement. I still keep my hand in it. Sometimes I take them to church with me, especially when they get older. The puppies are a little too quick for me. I can't tell you what a difference a dog makes in your life. Oh my gosh, I miss them so much, even though they're across the hall now and they'll let one come over to the room sometimes. I love to be around them. They are so loving and unconditionally accepting. They don't ask me why I'm here. I can take change if it's positive change. When it becomes negative, it's awfully hard to go backwards. It's gotten harder to do time. You look at the earlier photos, you actually feel human, wearing non-prison clothes. The only thing left in this bastion of identity is being able to do your hair or do something like that. The rest is gone. There's an underlying anger that seems to permeate this place. When I see things that happen, I think, uh-oh, I better check myself. Because I don't want to go around with that anger. It's a waste of time. They say the older people should mentor. But you can't mentor people who don't want to be mentored. They're very content to be where they are. It's a different generation, and it's hard to communicate with them and really have a relationship. When you live with 6 people in a room, and most of them are younger than your children, and some are the age of your grandchildren, there's not a whole lot in common. There are pleasantries and you keep it light, but there's no depth. When you go to express something, they don't get it. One thing that has kept me going is the realization that my crime does not define who I am. I did a horrendous thing. Believe me, every day when I look in the mirror, I know that. But I've changed and would never allow that to happen again. I have self-esteem now. I have inner strength. I am not my crime. I developed by being positive in my thoughts, actions, and deeds. My faith sustains me. I am where I am today because of my faith. I often think about what I said last time about a life sentence as a glass bottle. I did not take the shape of my environment. I am still able to rise above. There is the strength of a weed that grows up from the cement. It's a weed, but it's growing strong. I think of myself that way. A lot of weakness comes from not feeling good about yourself. I have enough self-esteem about myself to know who I am. I'm a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and most of all, a survivor.
Oops. Howard, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of the book, motivations for the book, including still doing life and then the progression from doing life and the progression to still doing life.
Right. I say a little bit. Well, I had been working with criminal legal system and issues around that for many years. I moved to Pennsylvania in 1990, and I was working at Graterford Prison doing some volunteer work, teaching, and I met some lifers, and also I had worked with a lifer in Alabama who had been on death row. I helped him get a lawyer, and he had told me one time, he said, it's like trying to keep a candle lit in a dark tunnel. And I got to wondering, what what is life like, and what have people learned who are facing life sentences? Um, so, and I'm kind of a connoisseur of prison. I used to be for prison photography, and what I noticed is that so much prison photography is dehumanizing. It just brings out all our stereotypes. We show people with the bars and all these bizarre things of a prison environment, and so we immediately make assumptions about them. So what I wanted to do was to give people a chance to present themselves without those kind of stereotypic clues. And so I got permission. At that time, it was a lot easier to do these things than it is today. As you can see today, people can't have any street clothes. In early 1990s, they were allowed a pair of street clothes. But anyway, I got permission to come in with a little studio set up and present people the way I'd want to be, with a backdrop and a studio strobe, and I interviewed people. And I my guides, I first met with a group of lifers and explained the idea, showed them some projects I'd done before, and they were enthusiastic about it and said they would help guide me through this process. So, and I was focusing really on what it's like to face a life sentence, what one has learned about life, what you compare a life sentence to. I was really interested in the metaphors that people use to understand their situations. And so I interviewed, I think, almost 75 people, and the book Doing Life came out in 96. It has 55 or something people in it. At first, I was going to do an exhibit, and so I had done a bunch of smaller interviews, because in the exhibits you can't have as many words. And then a group of lifers at Huntington Prison wrote me. They saw an article I had done in a national magazine, had some pictures, and they wrote to me and they said, we like what you did, but you didn't go nearly deep enough. And so I went back. I went to Huntington, sat down with about 20 guys, and we played around with ideas. And I said, okay, some of you have photos of when you came in. If you'll bring those, and then I will, at this time it was not digital yet, I will bring a Polaroid camera, and I'll do a picture of you now, and we'll lay those side by side, and then I'm going to start talking to you. Harry Twiggs on the right is one of those people. And that ended up with some longer interviews and more in-depth. It made a book possible, made a rhythm between smaller and larger. This was also a traveling exhibit. There's whole stories about that back in the day. I'd always wanted to go back, but it's totally against the rules these days. But I lucked out in that an insider in the system was enthusiastic about it and helped convince this. It's a longer story, but the system to allow me in again, even though it is against all the rules. And so I was able to go back to 22 of the people. And this time I asked them more about how they were coping with this after 25 years and what they had learned in those 25 years. So the focus of the interviewing was a little bit different. It was really great to go back. It was like connecting with old friends. It was so good as to have an excuse. A few of the people I've been able to keep in touch with, but a lot of them I had not. And so it was really good to do that. Everybody got free pictures out of this, by the way. Both of them. Uh, I gave prints the original, and I gave digital form this time. Freddie's laughing. So I've forgotten some. Anyway, that's a little bit about the book. I really believe photography has the potential, if it's used right, to challenge stereotypes, to connect people, to build bridges between people. Often it doesn't do that, but I believe it can. So that's enough.
Yeah, we can follow up on it later. So we'll move on and now hear just a shorter clip from Bruce Norris.
Been incarcerated for 42 years. A lot of wasted time. I've become a grandfather and a great-grandfather. It was hard enough watching my children grow up, and now I'm watching my grandchildren become young adults. It's a little tough to deal with, but I always reflect back on the person I killed, what their family's going through, or that his children now have grandchildren and great-grandchildren. At least I get to interact with my grandchildren and my children. I'm thankful for that. What keeps me going is that I've educated myself. I got my Bachelor of Arts degree from Villanova. I was in the dental lab for 9 years. I got involved in different programs, restorative justice and alternatives to violence and groups like that. I read a lot more now since I graduated from college, and I feel as though I can be an asset to young people coming in here. I have hope. I've always had a great spirit, even before I came to prison. The way I keep it up is that I mind my business, educate myself. I want to be a better person now than when I first arrived. I talk to young people a lot. I try to help them, give some of my education back to them. Things like that keep me going. I'm self-motivated and I take pleasure where I can find it. And I've always been a smiler ever since I was a kid. It's part of my DNA. I do have down times. I lost my mom several years back and it's still a soft spot for me. But I have to go on and do this time. I told myself when I first was incarcerated, your main focus is to survive. And I do that every day. I take that from my reading about the slave period. The older people said, don't go out there starting problems, because the one thing we don't need if we are to survive is to cause problems and have everybody killed or harmed. If we survive, we can reach greater heights. That's my motivation. I like reading things by and about African Americans. I just finished reading the 2 Barack Obama books, Dreams from My Father and The Audacity of Hope. I've learned that no matter where you are, what you do, who you are, or who you think you are, you always have to give back. You have to reach down, reach back, and help others. And you can't do it for something in return. It's little things like writing or reading a letter for somebody, or sharing books with people who might appreciate them. I give my time to young people because I wouldn't want my children to come into this institution and not have somebody who's older that they could look up to and be friends with. I tell them about my process and what I've been through. And they sit there listening. They don't cut me off. They allow me to speak. I always felt I should have been a counselor. I have a lot to say to them about how they should conduct themselves and what they should be getting involved in. I've always believed in the philosophy, each one teach one. Proud and satisfied where I am right here, other than the fact that I don't know if I'll ever get out. I think I've done everything that's humanly possible to show that I deserve a second chance. I hope others will think so too.
Oops. To follow up on what Howard was talking about with his motivation and progression with the two books, I just wanted to say a little bit about mine. I got involved for several reasons. One, Howard asked me to, and when Howard asks you to do something with him, you do it because it's going to be a good experience and it's going to be worthwhile and very meaningful. And anytime you get to spend time with Howard is just awesome. So there's that pragmatic, kind of relational thing with that. But also because of my own experience working in Pennsylvania prisons when I was at the Pennsylvania Prison Society in the early aughts, I knew some of the folks that were in this book. I had also was very familiar with the first book, Doing Life, and had used it a lot in my restorative justice work in various ways when I would do speaking engagements and that sort of thing. And so it really was a passion project, a project of love in many ways because of, knowing people, wanting people to get out, seeing all the amazing skills and qualities and things like that these folks had that we need on the outside on so many different ways. So I was very excited to get involved with the project and thoroughly enjoyed it. I did the main correspondence with all these folks as we were doing it, editing the interviews, making sure that the edits were okay with these guys. We also gave them honorariums because they are giving of their life experience for this project, and we felt that they deserve honorariums for that and some payment for that. So coordinated all that, and in the course of doing that, got to know some of the folks in the book that I didn't know before, just because of what they would share as we were writing back and forth. So very much, like I said, it's a labor of love for me and for people that I know who are in the book. Freddie, why don't you tell us all about your motivation for doing this and your experience in the book and your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, as I have often mentioned in previous opportunities, to share my reason for participating in Doing Life and still doing life 25 years later, it was primarily to educate those unaware of various components of the criminal justice system and show a characterization different than the stereotypical image of the life sentence prisoner. The dynamics of getting life was also important to show life sentence is not black and white as being accused or convicted of murder. Over approximately 60 to 70% of individuals serving life in Pennsylvania and commit murder are in there because they didn't commit murder. This is called accomplice liability, and it will get you the same exact sentence as the person that was primarily responsible for the murder or the homicide. So these issues were very personal to me. The two Doing Life books continue to provide, well, I thought at the time of doing it that it provided educational tools for those taking up the mantles of doing criminal defense through court trials and hearings. There's so much differentiation between getting the sentence because you're poor and versus getting the sentence when you have the proper funds to make a proper defense. Doing Life on the outside is also transformative. I wanted people to understand those sentenced and ultimately released, even if they make commutation, they continue to serve a sentence of imprisonment on lifetime parole. Life sentence, specifically in Pennsylvania, foster a concept that demands lives. Kind of says that damaged lives cannot be repaired, and the perspective anchors on society in a disregarding posture to disproportionately punish these individuals and incarcerate people in general to the point that they become devalued when and if ever they are released. A notable concept is putting those formerly incarcerated back into society on a path called second chances. The reality is many people, particularly those serving life sentences have aged out of most workforces, lack of technological skills, and they have no work history save prison work. Society looks at these individuals as if they're more of a burden than an asset. Seeing over incarceration as an issue to address the aging out process of prisoners in general, the fact that it affects the lifer population disproportionately should be alarming, since lifers have subscribed to a self rehabilitation motivation, pacing those serving less sentences for the same crime or similar affects their lives are changed more dramatically than those sentenced to lesser penalties. And this is basically due to the statutes. So all these things played a part in my, even though I had like 30 something years in when Howard and us first got together on this, it was very important that that this kind of message be put out to those who are interested in the I hate to say the criminal justice system, because there's really not much justice, but it's like, the court process, the criminal trials and the criminal hearings. This is what people really need to see, and how this impacts our prisons across the state.
Thanks. And
So that was my spiel.
okay. I just want to add to your spiel that Freddie's interview closes the book, and we actually have 3 interviews with him, one from 92, then 2017, and then 2020 or 2021 as well. So it was just a real gift to have you, Freddie, be open to doing that 3rd interview after you were out. And his is my favorite, and he ends it in my favorite way, and you'll just have to get the book to find out how he ends it. Yeah, it's really awesome. Just to close before we open it up, I had mentioned that we had a closing essay in the book, and that was just to kind of help the reader kind of wind down from what they had read in the photo essay part of the book. And we looked at kind of what was some common themes that we could glean out of the interviews. And where we landed is that really it was about notions of restorative justice and trauma healing, and really kind of the hope and possibility of transformation and transcendence and that sort of thing. And so that's the focus of the closing essay. And, again, it's about inviting dialogue. And we actually end that essay with questions for the reader about how do these notions of restorative justice play out in your life? How does transformation play out in your life? And hoping that having people think about the personal implications of this might, again, further dialogue about the sentences.
Barb, can I interject something?
Yeah.
Y'all heard from Bruce Norris, and I just want to say, Bruce made commutation, but he never got out before the governor was able to sign his papers for his release. He died in prison. So I just wanted to put that comment in there.
Thank you. Yeah. Let's open it up for questions and comments. And I will turn off sharing. Whoops. So that we can see everybody.
And let's use the hand raise function. And Barb, do you want me to kind of call on people?
Yeah, that would be nice. Thank you.
Okay. So any thoughts, questions, insights, reactions?
While we're waiting, I can say a little bit about the traveling exhibit. So the publisher of the book, The New Press, is awesome. And they were very interested in doing an exhibit to go along with the book. And even though they initially wanted the exhibit to be a fine art exhibit that might get hung in a fine art gallery, Howard and I were both committed to making it a traveling exhibit. And the publisher got funds from Art for Justice, which is was a national art and social justice funder, to do a project. And so what we have is it's 22 panels with the side-by-side portraits and just 1 or 2 sentence excerpts. Basically, the images that you saw in the PowerPoint are what's in the exhibit. We have 1 panel for every single person in the exhibit. They are printed on canvas and unframed. And so they travel really easily, rolled up in a box sent by FedEx, and they're hung in any number of ways. They've been hung with black painter's tape on a wall. They've been hung using magnets. They've been hung using binder clips, tape, you name it. They've been professionally hung with the ceiling things that hang down. I don't even know what they are. It's really in whatever way that people can hang it based on what their venue is. And again, you just pay for shipping, which I think round trip shipping is about 100. I can't totally remember. And then any supplies you might need to hang it, because we really want it to get into people's hands. And so keeping the bar really low. We have no funding for the exhibit to ship it, which is why we ask people to ship. So if you have any interest, I'm your contact for that. And please email me and I can be in touch with basic information. I coordinate the schedule for it. And of course, like to have it where, you know, if a few people on the East Coast are doing it, if there's any way to coordinate the schedule, then actually we have 1 exhibit based on the East Coast and 1 exhibit based here in the West Coast, now that I think about it. Yeah, so we can get them anywhere. So just be in touch. It's really a great opportunity. It's been in the last couple of years. I think we're at about 20 venues where it's been on display.
So
So-
Barb, in light of that, could you put your email address in the chat?
And if you email me like this week or next week, please wait for a reply. I'm on a quarter system and we're in our final weeks of the quarter. And I'm really slow at getting back to emails right now.
Would it help if people put in the subject line, the traveling? Okay, good. Thank you for that. David?
Yes, thank you for a great presentation. I can't wait to get my hands on the book. You may have talked about this, Howard, but I wasn't sure what the answer was. I'm very curious as to how the group was selected for the first round of photos, because I understand that the second group was selected from among the first group that you did. So how did you choose the first group of people for something like this?
Primarily referrals by other lifers. What I had asked for was people that were able to reflect on their experience. At Graterford, particularly, Tyrone Wirth, who is out now, has been out for quite a while, was the president at the time. And he would just, I'd be done with Graterford and he'd grab me in the hall and say, can you do 2 more? Can you do 2 more? So anyway, it was primarily, I wanted the referrals to come from lifers themselves and not from staff. And so I don't know if any came from staff, but mostly they were, from lifers. I tried, like I say, I tried to have a kind of an accountability group of lifers that would keep me on the straight and narrow, and tell me what to do and what not to do, and so forth. But yeah, that's how it just kind of one led to another. Somebody would say, you know, you really interviewed, you ought to include so and so. And in those days, it was much easier. I mean, in those days, I could come in on Friday night, just wander around the Graterford prison and the halls if I wanted to. Sure can't do that today. And I lucked out. The commissioner, what they call him, the Secretary of Corrections at the time, was a very progressive guy. And when I went to ask him for this permission, it turned out he had read my book, Changing Lenses, and asked his cabinet to read it. So I had it in, and he said, I want you to go to, apparently he had his reservations about life sentences. He said, I want you to go to every prison in the state. Well, I never made it to all of them, but it was a real luxury to have him behind me.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Howard. Jennifer?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I've really enjoyed it. I didn't have a question. I've been an inside out instructor for the past, since 2012. And this is a book that I use in my class. And I can say firsthand that a lot of my students, both inside and outside, really love this book. It's really powerful to see the pictures, especially 25 years later, as well as the stories that go along with it. So it really just personalized everything. And we had, excuse me, when we during this course, when we were talking about life without the possibility of parole, and we used this book, it really, so many students were talking about the problems with having a life sentence and they're trying to come up with various solutions and policy reform issues. So we had a really great discussion. And so I definitely encourage everyone who has not, if you haven't gotten the book, get the book. It's really insightful and powerful. So thank you for this.
Good. Glad to hear.
Thanks, Jennifer. Jonesy?
Hey, so I had to read this book for Inside Out. So I just finished it pretty recently, a few weeks ago. And like this book, and along with a couple other readings, really impacted me for a couple of reasons. And one of them is that I started to like recognize names over the course of like this semester. So like reading through, there was one article I saw Lori's name and I'm like, oh, I know Lori, and then one day in class she's talking about like John Pace, and then I got to meet John Pace, and then I noticed like a couple names aside from, obviously Howard and Barb, even Cindy. I'm familiar with her. She probably doesn't know me, but I went to the reentry um, simulation last year at Temple. So I feel like there's something really impactful about like kind of feeling a part of the community. And when I started to recognize that so much of the material that I read had been inspired by people who live, nearby me or are incarcerated nearby, that was really powerful. Another thing that was really powerful was like reading somebody's words who feel like they don't matter or feel like nobody is gonna know who they are. There's a poem in the book Just Mercy by, I think it might have been somebody who was incarcerated in PA, but I know it was somebody who was incarcerated as a youth. And when I was listening to the book on audiobook, and the first couple lines of the poem, I kind of thought, this poem isn't very good. I wonder why it's in the book. And then a couple of lines just like really hit me. And then when I knew who the author was, and it was somebody whose experience I had learned about in a previous chapter, I the poem just impacted me so much more. And almost the fact that the first couple of lines I didn't think were really good almost made it so much better. And I feel like there's something really powerful just about feeling so connected to the work that's like being done and starting to recognize names and faces. It makes the work like really feel alive, and I really appreciate that. So I just wanted to say hi, and that I really like the book, and it's nice to meet all of you and be a part of it as a student.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Freddie.
No, I was just saying thank you. I appreciate it too.
I just like that idea of the book being alive, because it is alive. I really think we feel the life in the folks who are in it, or at least I hope we're communicating that in it.
So I have a question. I guess for Howard and maybe for Barb as well. What it was like to go back and see the folks, the 22 folks, right, in the second book, what that was like for you emotionally.
Well, as you can imagine, it's kind of paradoxical. Because on the one hand, it's really hard to see people still there after all these years. And on the other hand, it's really good to reconnect with old friends in order to see where people are at. And it was really to see so people had such life. They had found ways to live, to overcome this situation. And that's really inspiring. So it's a combination of really hard to see people still there. And at the same time, really inspiring to see what they've learned and how they made a life for themselves in those really difficult situations.
I mean, I wasn't involved in the first book, but knew people like Marie and Bruce in particular from the early aughts. And there's always a certain sadness that they're being included in the book when one would hope things would have been different by this point. But Marie has gotten good news, not the news exactly that she wanted, but good news from the commutation board that she will eventually be seeing release.
Did you find in talking with people that they were still holding on to a sense of hope?
Yeah.
Hope in terms of getting out?
Well, there's a difference between hope and optimism. I mean, yeah, many of them had hope. And also there's been things happening in the last years. A few people have been getting out that earlier that there had been nothing. I mean, almost nobody was getting out. A few people are right now. And so every time somebody gets out, that does give some hope that it could happen. It seems that women are much less likely to get commutation than men. The women have a theory about that. But I don't know what the statistics, they bear that out, don't they, Barb? I mean, very few women have got commuted, have they?
I don't know statistically.
I
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah. I mean, women are lagging behind men.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you can throw out 30 men in, let's say, a year. I know that don't happen, but if you throw out men, 30 people a year on the men's side, maybe only one woman gets out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a fact.
Yeah.
Well, Howard, you said you had an idea of why that was.
Well, the women themselves think two things. One of them, they don't have nearly the opportunities inside that people like in Phoenix was Greaterford, because they're out in the boonies. The prisons are way out. Ellen's on this call. She knows about that. She does a lot of work with them. But the second one is they really believe that, men, we have stereotypes about men. We sort of expect them to be aggressive and violent. We don't expect women to be violent. And so they think we have a harder time getting our head around the idea that a woman might have been involved somehow in someone's death. And therefore that kind of stereotype is a barrier to it.
Yeah. Hey, Lloyd, can I add something? Through our meeting at the door program, like we've been able to bring out a couple of women, like I said, like anybody calling upon us. And we were able to have a conversation with a couple of women that came out. And part of the issue is women don't feel the remorse that the board basically requires that they have, because so many of them has been abused, by whoever, as children, as mothers, as girlfriends, and so forth. And they feel a lot of the crimes were of passion, and, it was survival and things of that nature. Now, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of the times that's what comes out, that, women basically don't show the remorse that the board requires of them when they present their packages and things, because they feel as though ultimately they predominantly been the victim of a lot of things that happen to them.
I'd like to chime in here about women lifers being commuted.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, there are, maybe 200 women serving life without parole in Pennsylvania. And overall, I think there's about 5,000 people serving life without parole in Pennsylvania. So women are a teeny tiny population of lifers. I don't know about the lack of remorse expression being an issue. I think that both sides can often have extreme victim opposition that really like vetoes their chances of having a successful public hearing outcome. I don't know if there's like a sexist issue going on. I mean, there are a lack of resources that women are offered. So men might have a more impressive prison resume than the women because they don't have the colleges nearby, or they don't have certain trades or work experiences. I don't know any more about that. It's so political, really. I mean, it's all about, who's elected, who's in power, that sort of thing. I mean, Elaine Seelan is also on this Zoom. She may have some thoughts about women lifers and being commuted.
Mhm. Thanks, Ellen. So
Sure.
let's go to Betsy first. You're muted, Betsy. Hey, Betsy, you're muted. We can't hear you.
One of the big issues with women is believing that they truly are defending their lives. Their lives are truly at risk, even if it's not in the usual fashion, that there's a gun at their temple, that abuse is truly about to kill them when they end up being convicted of murdering their abuser. It's not even handed, because the expectation of male aggression and male defense is different from what people picture about women doing and being able to do. I read about Marie Scott's vote from the Pardons Board, and I don't know, Barbara, if the governor has signed it or not,
Ellen
but
would
her
have to veto.
victims.
No, he has not. Marie Scott has 6 months more to serve before she's eligible for parole.
But her victims
Commutation.
wanted to extend her sentence for everything that she didn't convince them of her remorse enough. And their attitude, and this is true for very many victims that get quoted in the press, is the whole purpose of this is revenge. And she hasn't paid her dues enough, because the person she killed will never come back, and here she is. Well, you can't ever get out if that's the rationale. And it isn't. It is not the
That's right.
rationale for the criminal justice system. But people talk as if it were, and some victims believe that it is.
And
Thanks.
Marie's wanted so badly to have some way to reach out to them and make it right, and there's just not a system for that to happen that she can initiate. But she's talked about that ever since I've known her.
Well, actually, I was in touch with her victim's family, those two
Yeah.
women, 10 years ago or so. And it was brutal conversations I had with them. But the granddaughter did end up writing to Marie. And so Marie did have family connection. But the whole family is just, they're wildly dysfunctional. So we kind of expected that extreme opposition.
Elaine Salon, did you want to say something?
Well, Ellen and I are part of a commutation work group here in Pennsylvania, and it's amassed of individuals who just are very committed to seeing changes in the process and in the board itself. And it's very complicated. There are over 1,000 commutation applications with only 5 or 6 hearings a year. So you could do the math. There's no way that they're going to process these individuals so in a timely manner. So they're waiting years and years and years from the time that they submitted their application to finally getting through the merit review. And then if they get through that, then, excuse me, the public hearing. It's brutal. And some people just decide they give up because this is not going to work out. They know what the result's going to be. And so I think Bruce Norris broke my heart, by the way. I knew Bruce, I knew a couple of members of this family, and to see that him dying of COVID when Governor Wolf could have signed his commutation papers was heartbreaking. And so the whole process is archaic and designed not to work. That's men or women. It doesn't matter in that way.
Elaine, thank you. Any last comments before we move to closing? Or questions? Anne? We can't hear you, Anne. You're muted. Anne? There you go.
I always do that. I was wondering if you had selected certain individuals to do the voice readings. I recognized one of the names who's an active individual in all kinds of criminal justice activity. And I was wondering if the other people were busy with, different volunteer groups, different efforts as well. I think that is a very effective way of doing it. And then I had a question for Freddie.
Okay, I'll quick answer the first question. We had 4 people read different ones. When we had funding still, 2 of them we worked with Taya at Tova and had her suggest people in her networks that were systems impacted who could do it. And so Cameron, who I also know, was one of them. And I can't remember the name of the other one. Then we wanted to record 2 more really quickly. So I just and had no money. So I recruited a couple students, paid them a little bit less, and bought them a cupcake at a gourmet cupcake spot. So that one we had to move more quickly.
Very tricky.
Child labor.
Yeah. So Freddie, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing with folks. I know you took another Inside Out course recently, but online with formerly incarcerated students as well. And I was wondering if you could just mention how you thought that went and if you think that's the kind of activity that maybe we should look at bringing into the prison with formerly incarcerated students as well.
Well, I got 2 points on that. One, I thought it was fantastic because technology is not usually allowed into prisons across the state. So I took the class with Arcadia, and it was like storytelling. And, it just excited me to see how all these guys was like, if they couldn't come, they was actually upset. That they could not have this forum to express their ideas, their thoughts. I found it very gratifying, but I will also say nothing will replace the coming in of students to be with inmates, telling this, how you say, doving into this deep, dark water of prison and their experiences, because until you're sitting up there, like face to face with somebody that you might have read about, somebody that somebody else talked about, somebody that you might have bumped into at one, and now all of a sudden you may be sitting right next to them, and you have to decide whether or not the stereotypical attitudes of this prisoner, who most of the time were lifers, were people serving life without the opportunity of parole. and how over the course of these 8 to 12 weeks, I believe that we had it, people became family, almost family. I mean, there's protocols that's already set up between the students and the inmates, but nevertheless, a lot of these kids were like little sisters and little brothers and cousins and so forth and on, that you just had this genuine closeness to. So yeah, meeting that, don't get me wrong, meeting at the Inside Out is a phenomenal program. It definitely opens up an avenue for kids that are educating themselves specifically about the criminal justice system, but also the social issues of prison and the diversity of those who come into the criminal justice system and the mitigating circumstances that don't often get talked about. And that's a big part of meeting at the door, finding out that some of these guys are not only looking for second chances, but they're actually looking for first chances.
That's a great point. Fareed?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to thank you, Howard, for your incredible work with your lens. I'm an artist as well, too, more on the graphic design side, but I can't imagine the profound humility and honor you had going into prison with your camera to share telling their story. And as you so eloquently put, bridging that gap with your creativity to bring the story to the outside, and the way that is echoed with the traveling exhibit. I see that as like such a poetic gesture for so many people that will never get a chance to go to these places, that they're literally going all over, if possible, the world. So I applaud you all, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fareed. And we'll have to work on getting that at Temple. Absolutely. Well, this was just really wonderful and probably could go on for a while, but we want to be respectful of people's time. Howard, Barb, and Freddie, do you have any last words you'd like to say as we wrap up?
No, just thanks for having us.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you're doing this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, once again, it's anything that we can do to broaden people's view of the criminal justice system works for me. After spending all that time in prison and finally getting out now and being out these past 6 years, and basically being able to do some of the things that I did in prison, which was, be an advocate, be a helper, and do service. And that's where I'm at. So yes, thank you again.
Well, thank you for what you do, Freddie. Excellent. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you. Take care.